Fantastic. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope that each of you are enjoying a really lovely Friday morning. Thanks so much for joining us. I am super excited. We have been looking forward to today's meeting for the last several months. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us to have some really thoughtful conversation and for us to be able to do some meaningful work together and to build on some of the work that some of our members have so generously been spending their time and mental energy working on for the last several months as we think about kindergarten transitions. So welcome to today's October 16th meeting of the Early Childhood Recommendations Panel. Thanks for being here. A couple of notes about today, as today is a remote meeting. We're meeting remotely today by Zoom, obviously, due to the health and safety concerns of the pandemic. This YouTube video live stream can be reached by visiting the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund website, and all the materials that we're discussing today can also be found on the Children's Cabinet website. If somebody visits that website, they can click the About tab, they can select Early Childhood Recommendations Panel, and they can select meetings to see today's agenda and the other materials that we'll be discussing. All participants, please do make sure that your microphones and phones and other electronic devices are muted when you're not speaking so that we can all hear each other. Please do, I'm Amanda Peterson from KSDE, please do identify yourself clearly when you begin speaking so that people who are listening know who you are. And the chat function is not something that we're going to be using to communicate with one another and make decisions, since people who are watching via YouTube can't see that chat panel. So if you use it, it'll just communicate to me and to Debbie. Each motion, if any, will be clearly stated before the committee votes, and I'll ask for a show of hands for each vote and will clearly announce the results of the final vote. Public comment will be allowed during the Kansans Open Forum portion of the meeting, and we will not go to executive session for today's meeting. As a reminder, we've got a really neat, helpful feature in Zoom called the Raise Hand feature, which you can get to by clicking the three little dots, I believe, next to your name. That's a helpful piece, like using either that or the emojis, and I think that is enabled for today's meeting. If it's not, then you can feel welcome to wave or to jump in, and we will facilitate that as we go. So with that, I would like to draw all of your attention to the proposed agenda, which is something that we sent out. I will note, thanks so much for joining today at 9 instead of 9:30. We know that the times we didn't get adjusted from the last time we had the meeting. So rest assured, we're not going to have kind of a half-hour time warp where we jump ahead to 9:30. But other than that, the agenda is as we sent it out. So you can see here what we have listed for today. The majority of our time today will be spent discussing the work of the Kindergarten Transitions Work Group draft memorandum of understanding and discussing what we as a panel would like to do with that document as we move forward. So with that, I would appreciate, we've got 2 action items. And I would appreciate a motion where you clearly identify yourself to state the motion, and similarly for the person who's making the second so that we can capture them for the minutes. Do we have somebody who'd like to approve the agenda for today?
This is Amy Meek, and I'll approve the agenda.
Thanks, Amy. Do we have a second?
Cornelia, second.
Thank you, Cornelia Stevens. I appreciate it. And so if you are in favor, please raise your hand or do a thumbs up emoji on the, there we go. And I am scrolling. Thank you. We have approved the agenda. And then similarly for the meeting minutes, did we have any, do we have any discussion on the meeting minutes? We want to make sure that we've got that we've got a good, that we've correctly captured the conversation that we had, because we want to be able to use these minutes to be able to share, you know, here's some of the considerations that we have as the state responds to the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you did see any suggested edits or pieces where we could be more clear, we really would welcome any suggested amendments to those minutes. Not hearing any, do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
It's Dave Lindeman. I move we approve the minutes of September 18.
Thank you, Dave. Do you have a second?
This is Maritas. I second the motion.
Thank you, Maritas. All right, same drill. If you could raise your hand or do a thumbs up emoji if you would like to approve those. I'm scrolling. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We have approved those minutes. I will turn it over to Debbie to share some follow-up items from our last meeting.
Okay, just to recap a little bit, what happened in our September meeting. If you remember, we had a very good discussion on the COVID-19 response and what has been happening over the past 6 months and some of the challenges and suggestions that came from that discussion. And that will also came from the October 2nd meeting for the cabinet, and we will share those approved minutes with the cabinet members. We discussed the various councils, committees, and work groups that are existing in the early childhood profession, and decided that it would be very helpful to develop a resource directory that would be made available to everyone on that. And so that is in the works and will soon be posted on the cabinet website for everybody's reference. And that will be an ongoing directory that will be forever changing. There was some conversation about the importance of exploring some policy options for paid leave for early child care and education providers. It has been brought to the forefront definitely during the COVID situation, but I think it's an issue that is always going on. And so we are in the process of exploring those research policy options. And then recently, I was able to get enough interest. We have 16 panel members who expressed an interest in participating in the Kansas Leadership Center's training that is coming up throughout 2021. And so a grant was submitted last night, and we are anxiously awaiting the results from that to see if we will get the opportunity to do that. So it's I'm very excited about that to be able to share with everyone. So that's all I have for today.
Awesome. Our fingers are crossed, Debbie, on the results of that. And thank you so much for all of your work on all of these pieces as we continue to move the work of this panel forward. All right, this is the portion of our meeting where Kansans have the opportunity to connect to be able to share any feedback if they're not quite sure where in the early childhood space they want to share that feedback and elevate it for us to consider and for policymakers to be aware of. Debbie, I know that we visited yesterday afternoon. I don't believe that we have any folks who signed up to share public comment today.
Correct. I did not receive any.
Fantastic. So we will move on to the next portion of our meeting, but we will keep in mind for those who are listening on YouTube or for all of us on here, this is an opportunity if somebody would like to elevate an issue or share feedback on something that we are discussing either at a current meeting or in the future. This is a great opportunity for folks who aren't appointed members to this panel to be able to help share their feedback and shape the conversation as we move forward in our work. All right. So we have lots of time today to be able to discuss the Kindergarten Transitions Memorandum of Understanding, the work that has been underway, and the process and the pieces there that we have to make sure that we're focusing on this really important element of our Kansas early childhood system. I am so appreciative that so many members of the panel stepped up to be able to work on this for the past several months. They've been really hard at work. They've developed a great starting point for our conversation today. And so I'd like to turn it over to Peggy Kelly, who's been leading that work, to be able to speak a little bit about the background and provide us all a good understanding of what's been done so far.
Well, hi, it was a pleasure to be able to lead this group. And I just want to take a moment to honor the 12 people that eagerly and actively participated. Natalie McLean, Marita Saltuna, Sheila Mermosillo, and I apologize if I pronounce anyone's names, Reva Waiwatis, Amy Gottchemer, Rachel Ano, Mallory Ariano, Jan Schneiderman, Kim Kennedy, Dee Rankin, and Cornelia Stevens are the panel members, as well as myself. And then Debbie Deere and Jordan Christian also participated as supports to that. So we want to just thank everybody for their time and energy. And I will say a lot of energy went into this. In the relatively short time we worked on this, there were at least 6 meetings and maybe more. I lost track of between the group and the subgroups. So lots of energy was put into this. We were asked, and I will say we're the inaugural group to bring something to the panel. So I think this is going to be a learning experience as well as a discussion opportunity. So we'll see what we learn and how this goes. But we were asked to bring our work in 3 particular contexts, and one is how equity participate was informed this recommendation, and the equity aspect really comes into the implementation of this tool. This tool was developed as a resource for communities to utilize in their own kindergarten transition process. And by its nature, it is multi-voiced. The intent is that lots of entities will be involved in these MOUs and in creating how it's used in each community. So parents and different organizations and schools and Head Starts and child care providers and really anyone with an interest can find a space to be involved in the actual implementation of the MOU and the documents. And we were asked to describe how families help shape this recommendation, and we went to the needs assessment, and there were clear comments from families stating that they needed smoother transitions in ways to support children and young family with a continuum of care and continuum of support, and really that from prenatal birth through elementary, but specifically includes transition from kindergarten into kindergarten, which is so important. And also that disconnect is common in transitions, particularly from early childhood to K-12, leaving families unsupported and at risk. So we use those points from the needs assessment specifically to help focus us on making sure we were providing things that were going to be supportive to families. The third thing we were asked to talk about was councils, committees, work groups with expertise, experience, or jurisdiction related to this issue. And our work group was well populated with lots of different perspectives. Representing our local education, institutions of higher education in the state, local providers for early childhood and development, and have Head Start, as well as the parent of a young child currently receiving early childhood services from the state of Kansas. So I think we were able to have a diverse and wide array of perspectives. And then also, how does what we're bringing forward connect with the strategic plan? And there were 6 references, 2.1.3, 2.2.1, 2.2.3. I think this is probably in something you've received, 4.5.1, 2, and 3. And those all related to use of the ASQ snapshot as a standard assessment to help assure children's learning needs and development needs are met as they're transitioning into this new learning opportunity, and that family voice is sought through feedback, and also partnerships across the array of entities involved in any particular transition, and that all families are informed and given the assistance to have individual plans helping that particular family transition.
And Peggy, if I can hop in to connect some dots for just to make sure that everybody is familiar. So the All In for Kansas Kids strategic plan is something that all panel members received a hard copy of, and anybody can find by going to the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund website, clicking on All In for Kansas Kids and looking at the strategic plan. And when Peggy is referencing those numbers, we've got the plan broken into strategies and then into tactics within those strategies, and they're all numbered to make it really easy to find. So when you see when you see one of those referenced in something like this, you can open your strategic plan and go, and you probably can't see this super well on the screen, but you can go and click to an individual tactic to be able to see and say, okay, here's what that is, with the idea being that all of us have a role to play in putting that plan into action.
Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate your bringing that, giving that grounding. And I believe we are now ready to, I'm trying to mess with my computer so I can get back to seeing my screen. I think we're now ready to take a look at the actual work. And Amanda, are you going to screen share the actual MOU? Is that?
I would be happy to.
Okay. And let me introduce and pass it off to Natalie McLean with KSDE Early Childhood. She led the our work ended up dividing into two subgroups, one to work on the actual MOU and another to work on an accompanying activity worksheet. So Natalie is going to talk with us about the actual MOU document.
Thanks, Peggy, and thanks, Amanda, for bringing that up. So our MOU, we wanted to make so any community could pick this up and make it their own. We've got this broken into about 5 sections. So the first section talks about scope of work. It helps programs lay out the purpose of their collaboration, how they're going to work together. It talks about roles and responsibilities for each of the players. They can define what outputs they want to see from this collaboration, how data is going to be shared. They'll establish timelines and consider other partners that could help in the transition process and determine the resources that each participant will provide. So that's what's in the scope of work section. Again, if there's anything that they wanted to pull out or add to that, this document will allow that so they can make it their own. The next section talks about term of agreement, and this section just lays out the timeline of the MOU and how long it's going to last and when they need to come back to it. The next section talks about compensation, payment, and funding. If there's any compensation or pricing or payment, this is where they'll talk about that. There may not be, so they may not even need this section. The next section talks about termination. This is where programs would describe how termination of the MOU would be carried out. And then the next section talks about reporting requirements. This is where programs would define the desired outcomes of the work and how they will be evaluated. And again, they can add in and take out anything they need depending on what works best for the community. If we could go to the next section, we've also included an appendix. And the appendix just gives programs some examples on activities, on data sharing, and some potential partners that they could include in their MOUs. In the body of the MOU, it refers to the appendix. We didn't want to make people feel like these were all required or suggested. We just wanted to have kind of prime the pump to kind of give them some ideas on things that they could use as activities, some things that they might want to think about as far as data sharing, and then some potential partners that they could have involved in their MOU. Are there any questions on this? That was a really quick overview of a lot of options that there are in this MOU. Okay. Well, that's all I have on this template. Do you want to talk about the worksheet a little bit, Peggy?
Sure, and I just would maybe want to context one thing that we spend a lot of time talking about to clarify that the MOU is actually should be the product, the end result of an intentional planning process that may be a fairly lengthy process depending on where a community is starting from. So it isn't intended to be that a group comes together in one meeting, they've got an MOU drafted out and ready to roll. This is intended to be the documentation of an intentional work product. So
thanks for clarifying that, Peggy.
And Amy Gottshammer had a brilliant idea and around helping to make this real, or as my fiddle teacher says, really, really real. That this is something that's living and breathing and is not only sets the framework, but a path. So Amy, do you want to take it from here and share the work template?
Sure. Thank you, Peggy. This is Amy Gottshammer.
Could I jump in real quick? I think Emily Barnes had a question.
Oh, sure.
Emily?
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So I'm just making sure that I understand it correctly because I saw like the list of potential partners in there that, you know, pre-K, childcare providers, parents and caretakers, all of that. Is this entering into an MOU? Is that like, let's say a childcare provider decides that this is part of what they want to offer. Is this that they're entering into the MOU with the parent, with their client, or with the school district, or it? Can you provide me a little clarification on that?
That's a great question, Emily. Thank you. The MOU is a community or systems level agreement. It sets the framework for how the various systems work together in supporting any child and family in their transition. The actual individual plan that a child or family, that is built around a particular child or family would be just that, a transition plan. Okay, does that help? The MOU itself is with the entities, not something that each child and family has to sign with all the entities.
Yes, that's actually helped. So like, let's say I decided that this is something that I like and I want to implement in my business model. This is my overarching plan to ensure that families leaving my program are able to transition. And so I would work more closely with the community as a whole, therefore more like my school district type of thing. And I would like my neighborhood elementary school, things like that. I would be in contact with schools that I generally tend to send children off to and say, hey, these are things I will do so that the children you receive from me are more prepared.
Right. It would define those relationships and that process so that you could know how to interact and then work with each family in creating their own plan.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions before we turn it over to Amy? Okay.
Okay, again, this is Amy Gottschammer. So for me, I need things that are a little more visual sometimes to kind of help implement. And so as soon as we started talking about the MOU, I thought I need to be able to sort of lay this out. and so I thought of using a template like this. And so it's kind of hard for you guys probably to see the detail on it, but the first section, it clearly says roles and responsibilities. You'll find that each of these different steps align in some way with the MOU document. So there is a section in the MOU that calls for roles and responsibilities. So for in that place, you may have school district representatives, childcare representatives, whoever they may be, but you want to look at what their role might be in that group. So you may have somebody that serves as the chair. You may have somebody that's a liaison between partners. You may have somebody that's in charge of marketing and public information output, making sure people understand when maybe certain events or activities are happening, that kind of a thing. So that would be your place for that. In step 2, activities and milestones, there is that list. It tells you to refer back to the appendix, as Natalie was mentioning earlier. And so this might include things like talking about how we can share data. It might include sharing professional development. So if there's something related to kindergarten curriculum and you want to include not just the school district employees, but also pre-K teachers in your community from private Head Start, other community-based programs. That might be a particular activity you want to look at. Maybe you're just looking at family engagement activities, shared roundups, health fairs, things like that. So this would be your place to list in individual ideas for activities that your group would like to work in. The next step would be looking at what other potential partners do we want to bring into this. So if we're thinking of doing a health fair, maybe we want to talk to our health department. Maybe we want to talk to some health providers and bring them in on that particular activity to help support what our MOU team, our transition team is doing. And then step 4 is pretty clear. It's just your timelines and your duration. So is it a one-off event? Is it something that you're doing annually? Is it something that's happening over a long period? Maybe you've got a teacher visits that are going to go out to your pre-K classrooms, and that may happen throughout the year at different periods of time. It may be that you're going to do a transition camp or an orientation type thing. That's a big, maybe a 1-week event, maybe it's a 1-day event. And you've brought in other private schools and other business partners. Maybe you can bring in business partners in that step 3 potential partners. It could be people that provide financing or funding in some way to help support these activities. It could be your local library, your resource and referral agencies that also might participate. Are there any questions on kind of what those activities might look like, who the partners might be, any of that before we move on to the second section? Okay, so the next one kind of focuses really just on the outcomes. So in that step 1, the first column, you're going to list the activity and then say what changes do I expect I'm going to see. And step 1 and step 2 of this section really go together, the desired benefits of the outcome, that what benefits do you expect as a result of these changes? And I actually kind of had to think on that a little bit myself, and to be really clear about what the difference was between those two, because they do seem to be similar in a way. So if you look at it, it's more that step 1 really leads to step 2. So I'm going to read you just a little sample that actually Natalie wrote. So I give credit here. She said, for example, a community changing to use the same math curriculum in pre-K and kindergarten, the benefits would be that outcome would be that the children would be using a familiar tool that would help reinforce terminology and the vocabulary used. One curriculum may use the term oval when another uses ellipse. Whereas that benefit is going to be that changing to the unified curriculum could prevent the children from having to relearn that term. So, they're similar in a lot of ways, but you're looking to see how that change leads to the benefits. The next step is going to be evaluating your outcomes. So what measures are you going to use? Is it going to be surveys, observations, whatever tool, method makes sense for your particular activity? And the last one is a look back. So that's going to be after you've done your activity. Can you identify that there were any unexpected outcomes, something that might inform your planning in the next year or for the next committee that you just didn't see coming and you want them to be aware of if they're going to consider doing a similar activity in the following year. And that's really what we've got in terms of the content of it. It is designed to be a digital tool, so you would work on it on a laptop or a tablet while you're meeting. You can add lines as you go. The cells will enlarge, and you can just build it to be whatever you need it to be, and as big as you need it to be. Are there any questions on that?
Thank you, Amy. This really is the part that makes the whole process living and breathing, where the MOU sets the framework and this really gives it the lungs. So, okay.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the final steps just to allow you to really implement, maybe a little bit easier for some people to visualize it this way. Thank you.
Okay, Amy, Amanda, I think that wraps up our presentation, so we'll turn it back to you for our next steps.
Fantastic. Well, this is Amanda Peterson, everybody. Thank you, Peggy, Natalie, Amy, and all the members of the team for your work on this. I'm going to pause for just a minute. There we go, to get us to this place. So we've been asking questions as we go, and I'd like for us to now do 2 things. As Debbie and I were visiting about this meeting, we were asking ourselves, okay, what will make this meeting be a successful one? We know there's a lot of excellent work that has gone into the development of these draft resources, and what do we want our next steps to be? And you all might remember that as we were developing our plans for this panel, as we were outlining our roles, our role as a panel, our norms, and our procedures, we really did want to set this panel up to be one that is action-oriented, that's able to identify needs, like the fact that communities might need some additional tools to help them in their processes for creating smooth transitions to kindergarten. And we wanted the panel to be able to take those identified needs, and excuse me for a minute, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry about that. So we wanted the panel to be able to take those opportunities to be able to move the work forward. So we decided that today we would really have, at the end of today's meeting, we would have worked through a recommendation and either determined that there were some clear next steps that the panel needed to take, or been able to say, all right, we feel confident in our ability to make this recommendation today and to be able to move it forward. And Debbie sent out some information on the document that we're going to be working from. This is really our opportunity to be able to do this for the first time, to be able to say, okay, our name is the Early Childhood Recommendations Panel, and the verb that we do, the thing that we come together to do, is make recommendations by identifying who we're making that recommendation to and saying, you know, we've got a pretty good representation of the Kansas early childhood system here on this group. We've got some phenomenal expertise and experience from around the state. So what do we think needs to happen in Kansas to be able to realize the goals that are outlined in the All In for Kansas Kids strategic plan and build the kind of state that we want to see? That was a lot of high level stuff. Do we have any, before we start talking about the nitty gritty of this document, do we have any thoughts or feedback or questions or comments about our role as a panel and what we're trying to do today?
Amanda?
Absolutely, Peggy.
This is Peggy. We had a lot of conversation in the work group about, okay, so what is this and what does this do?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a lot to get to the point that we realized that recommend is what we can do. We can't say to communities in Kansas, you must use this. This is the only way that this kind of work can be done in Kansas and the only acceptable process. And we realized that wasn't what we were doing or desired to do, but creating resources and tools to support a community in coming together. So I think what, you know, we need to however we determine to get this out, I think we need to be clear in our messaging that this is a supportive tool, that we highly encourage communities to engage in this kind of systems level work and partnership connection, and that these are resources, and we really want each community to feel free to take them, and as Natalie used the word, make them their own, and that really is our intention with this. Mm-hmm. There is no right way that it's supposed to end up. The right way is the right way for your community. Mm-hmm. With probably the one caveat being multi-people, multi-partners, many people at the table.
And other members of the work group, I know that there was some really thoughtful conversation around this point. Are there any thoughts or any pieces that were considered when thinking about so we, as a panel, we make a recommendation. Who do we want to make a recommendation to? Is it communities? Is it state agencies? Is it a different group of folks? And this can be ideas and possibilities, not necessarily here's what we landed on.
This is Peggy again, and I don't want to speak for everybody on the panel. So please, so please, folks, speak up here and get your thoughts in. But we did talk about possible ways to disseminate it. Would be all of us that are, you know, we have a wide array of representation. We all have websites and social media and email listservs and our own circle of influence within the early childhood world, as well as, you know, the cabinet's website and some of those well-known places for information. So we were hoping that we would recommend that everybody do their part in spreading word of this and making it easily accessible in lots of places once it's formally accepted.
Mm-hmm. And Peggy, when you're saying everyone, so that would be members of this panel, and then kind of the networks that we have through our own professional organizations, or
Right.
our employers, for lack of a better word.
Right, right. We weren't clear as to the process of getting from this conversation to what, a formal is ready to use looks like. We figured that was for today to figure out.
Yeah, I think this is Cornelia Stevens. From my perspective, Peggy, you're doing an amazing job in being the spokesperson, and so I am. You keep doing it. That's good. To add, I guess additional thought would just be that we don't. My thought would be that this is not something that necessarily has to be like from a state level down versus a community that pushes out. So that way it's something where people realize that, this really is for anybody that wants to collaborate and work together. And so whatever format that, where that can happen, where it just gives people a framework, where to begin. You don't know what you don't know, right? So if you've never had to come up with an agreement like this or something like that, here's a skeleton of what it could look like. And these are the kind of people that you would want to engage in. So, whatever method needs to happen where that kind of spread can happen, where again, it's not this is what we want you to do, but these are recommendations. And again, as Peggy said, us using our contacts throughout the early childhood committee, throughout childcare communities, whatever it is, just again, some way where it's more of a community push with that community drive versus something that where we have to tell you, where we're telling you this is what you have to do.
I think one thing that we did have some discussion around was there's a long list in the appendix of who partners might be. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to sign on to the agreement. Some people may be partners just for one particular activity. And others may be, sort of on this actual team that maybe meet regularly and agree and vote on different things to happen. But maybe you're bringing in your public library for one event, or you're working with your health department for one event. They're still a partner, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily have to sign the agreement.
This is Emily Barnes, and one of my thought process is, as far as the distributing and disseminating, in recent years, things like the use of the ASQ assessment has been worked into many of the grant programs through Child Care Aware. Perhaps for many of the early childhood providers, whether it's center-based pre-K or family home, perhaps that's one way of getting the information out to say, here's this resource, you may choose to use it, and then education and information around the concept, so that the early childhood providers and educators are active in the use of it, rather than like we said, we're trying to avoid this mandated recommendation or things like that, the top down, but that it's more of a here's a tool for you to use, and that might be one avenue of how to distribute the information.
This is Amy Gottchammer. We did also have listed on the in the appendix the ASQ, the Ages and Stages questionnaire, perhaps as a data sharing tool, because a lot of districts, of course, are using Ages and Stages for the kindergartners, so that looking at data sharing from the pre-K level to the kindergarten level in the public schools certainly would be an activity that would be a great opportunity.
Yeah, this is Amanda, and a big part of why the state adopted that particular tool is because as we were thinking about this joint community-wide effort to help schools and parents and families all get ready for the start of kindergarten, having some of that common language and common tools we thought might be really helpful. Paula, did I see that you had something to share?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of build off of Emily's comment. As I'm thinking about this, to me, I kind of envision like an introduction of even why this is important. And that then we have some place in there where we can talk about, if you're a child care center, kind of here's how you might want to think about this in your program. If you're a family child care provider, here's how you might approach this. Like, I would think some folks may not even know who they need to talk to at their school district. So giving some recommendation in that kind of intro of who you even want to talk to at your school district and how you might find that person might be a really helpful addition. And then here are some tools then to help you when you start that conversation.
Absolutely. And in looking, even if you look on the Head Start website and their kindergarten readiness to transition pages, they talk about how this process would be a year-long introduction to that it would start at the beginning of the pre-K year. And then you would start with just that information, making sure they do know who to talk to in their schools or in their districts, and giving them all of that lead up information that they need to have a really solid and smooth transition would certainly be impactful, as you suggest.
This is Natalie McLean again. So when we talk about how these resources could be distributed, if we think about KSDE sharing the tool with school districts, if we look at Head Start, sharing it with the Head Start programs, and then look at possibly Child Care Aware, sharing it with child care facilities and families, do we think that would reach most of our targeted audience that would use that?
This is Amy Gotchaber. Did you mention KDHE then, Natalie? Like licensing surveyors who would have access to emails for all of the licensed providers in their counties?
I didn't, but that would be another place that we could do that. I was thinking Child Care Aware would have the more resource type things, but you're right that KDHE would also have that.
This is Amy Meek. Did you mention KSDE's website? I'm thinking school district might go there first to your early childhood section. Yeah. And then I was thinking of the Kansas Quality Network site also for providers. I don't, is through the links to quality work. So.
And this is Peggy. I think also the KSA UIC and the Child Care Provider Coalition are also venues we'd want to encourage to share this because they're another trusted voice.
I also wonder this, and maybe this is way in left field, but would it be good to at least inform pediatricians that the MOU as a concept exists? Because since they do kind of do a quick little developmental assessment in the well child checks, they would at least understand that it's a concept, not that they would be responsible to implement an MOU, but it just an awareness of it.
This is Emily Killo. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I'm a pediatrician at Children's Mercy, and I was actually just waiting, and I was going to say the same thing because pediatricians also use the same ages and stages tool at well child checks. And so I think it would correspond pretty nicely. And I could work with someone offline as we're kind of moving through, but we could put something out with the Kansas AAP. So that's the American Academy of Pediatrics chapter in Kansas, and try to do some type of information sharing or something like that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emily. Go ahead, Heather.
Hi, this is Heather Staub with KDHE. A couple more entities that I thought we might consider would be the local ICCs, because they're heavily focused around transition, and it's one of the things that they are tasked to do, and they bring a lot of really great stakeholders together. I also thought about the state home visitation group, that they've got a website, and so that would maybe get us aligned with some other home visitation models. So,
and Heather, could you give the 30-second overview of what a local ICC is for those who might not be familiar?
Oh, yeah. So across the state of Kansas, we have, I am not sure the exact number. We have 31 Part C programs right now, but we have more than that for state interagency coordination councils, local ones, sorry. And so basically they work to collaborate on behalf of Part C, which is early intervention services, and Part B, which is special education 3 through 5, to collaborate and make sure that communities are using resources effectively, referrals into those services are happening the way they should. They can help with MOUs. They have a list of different people that should be participating in those. So we really want parents to be involved. And then there's a whole host of other, I guess, partners that we like to have at the table with those. So really, we know that no one entity can do this work by themselves. And so it's a really great tool for local communities to make sure that everybody's at the table working together on the behalf of young children. So I think that they would be a really great mechanism to share out, because usually we see a really great diverse group of stakeholders at those. I don't know, does that count, Amanda?
That's fantastic. Thank you. And then I had seen some, Rachel, Anno, had you come off mute to share?
No, yes and probably no, but it's fine. I was just, to Emily's piece about pediatricians, I was also thinking maybe the hospital associations and seeing if they could send out through their mailing list to local or to the area hospitals. That would get it out to the rural areas of probably maybe even more than what just the pediatrician association would be, since it would be, it could affect more family practitioners and stuff like that who aren't just doing the peds piece.
Yeah, this is Emily. That's a good idea. There's also a Family Practice Association of Kansas, and we could get on their mailing list too. And I know they have a monthly newsletter, so we could do both the FP one and the PEDS one also.
This is Debbie, dear, and I just got a message on the chat saying don't forget the Ecbg funded programs, and then also making sure that we can reach out to some of the private run preschools.
And for those listening who might not be in a community with that, Ecbg is Early Childhood Block Grant, which is a source of funding from the Children's Cabinet. Go ahead, Peggy.
Another group that kind of surfaced, not specifically from this work, but from the larger work we're doing, is some of the private school systems and wanting to know how to engage in a community process. So I don't know how you communicate with that aspect of the system, but probably an important group to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is Amanda Peterson. I will share that from the KSDE perspective, so you all may be familiar that all accredited school systems, public and private, are required to do, to partner with families to administer the Ages and Stages questionnaire at the start of the kindergarten year. So as a result, we have a list of all of the schools or all of the kindergartens that are accredited by the Kansas State Board of Education. So we're able to reach them. It's kind of a diverse bunch in terms of, we have some systems that operate as a network, kind of like a school district, and then some where they each individually accredit by building, but we are able to connect with that group. I will highlight for everybody that since kindergarten is not mandatory in Kansas, there are some unaccredited kindergarten type programs that are out there. So it doesn't catch everybody, but gets a good chunk of them. Cassandra, did I see that you had a piece? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe like the Parents as Teachers organization would be good.
And this is Peggy again. I also wonder about like Chamber of Commerce or economic development kinds of entities. You know, early childhood and child care has definitely come on the radar of economic development as an important aspect in every community. So it would just be another way to communicate and make sure that the whole community is invested in and understands why good transition processes are good for the community as well as for the families.
Hi, this is sorry.
Oh, sorry. This is Debbie again from chat, and someone had mentioned the maternal and child health local agencies. And a thought that I had to piggyback off of Peggy for the chamber, a lot of communities also have like social service organizations with various names, but that get together with all of those agencies that could possibly distribute this information as well and utilize it.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, this is Kelly France Langford. I was thinking that our post-secondary institutions could also benefit from reviewing this model, but also as they're building the workforce, being able to use this tool as they send out their professionals within their own communities or within their community, getting to know, being tasked with getting to know what are the systems involved, who are the organizations, who are the your other child care workforce to consider as you're moving kids into kindergarten would be important.
I have another chat comment about the Kansas Action for Children and their social media communications could possibly be another dissemination.
All right. Well, in hearing this piece, I'll share what I'm thinking, but this might not necessarily reflect where we want to go as a panel. So certainly feel very welcome to tell me if I'm understanding this incorrectly. It sounds to me like what a helpful next step would be to develop a short introductory message that is appropriate for sharing in a newsletter or to a wide audience that kind of very concisely spells out, here is kind of what goes into the transition into kindergarten, and here's why it's important for a community to really thoughtfully think through how partners are working together to make sure that that is a smooth and positive experience for kids and families. And we have some resources that communities can choose to use or to make their own if they would like to come together and engage in a planning process to be able to support that. And thinking about those resources, I'm thinking that we have the two that we've considered here today, and then we also have the webinars that have been recently recorded for the All In for Kansas Kids work, where there's been good hour-long conversation about these issues. And that once we have that message that we want to share it, we've got quite a list here, so we want to be able to share it with members of this panel and then with the different partners who we have listed here so that they can share that out in their own networks. Is that about what we're thinking we want to do as next steps for this piece? Yep, I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay. We get to think together about whether as we were developing the plans for this panel, and as we were thinking about it, I think that we all will get the opportunity to think, okay, when do we need to direct kind of the folks who are staffing the panel to be able to take work and do it moving forward? And when do we need to make a formal recommendation that goes to somebody to do something so that we've got kind of that artifact of our work? And I am really open to some conversation about whether we need to develop that kind of recommendation today. I'll remind everybody as you're thinking about, okay, what's the distinction here or why does this matter? when we've got kind of our governing role, norms, and procedures document. And in that we outlined, okay, we'll do work in terms of working together and communicating together. We have norms that govern how we do our work, but we also have outlined some times when we need to make specific recommendations. And I'll admit that as we were drafting this, I was thinking that this would be a little bit more towards like if we need to recommend that a state agency or an elected body or another appointed body needed to do something, we outlined what this would look like. Do we have any thoughts, panel members, about whether today what we need to do is just kind of continue doing work on the staff side, or whether we need to work on a formal recommendation?
This is Emily Barnes. With the MOU, with everything that we're saying, you know, we want to get it out, we want to inform people of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Are we saying then that, like, if we made a recommendation, that our recommendation is to say this exists for various entities to use? Because it doesn't sound like we're saying this exists and it should be used, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely what I heard from, this is Amanda, definitely what I heard from the work group is that this is a option for communities, but if they have another tool or thought or process about how they want to come together to engage in transition planning, they can do that. I will highlight, and Peggy, you can feel welcome to speak to the Head Start side, but for school districts that are receiving Title I funding, which is a federal source of funding, there is a requirement that they develop, I'm not going to get this language exactly right, but that they develop agreements with Head Start partners and, to the extent feasible, other early childhood programs in their community around this area. Go ahead, Peggy.
Yeah,
Clean up
on
my
the
language
Head
for me.
Start. Yeah, no, I probably can't be more precise with it either, but there is a clear expectation in the Head Start performance standards that Head Start programs do have a formal agreement in place with their receiving school districts to define how they work together and how transition works. As much operational within the year as well as how children transition successfully. So those two entities do have a formal expectation. Doesn't mean they can force others to join in, but it certainly leaves a process that could be used as an invitation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Amy Meek, did I see you come off mute?
Yeah, this is Amy Meek. I was wondering about the recommendation. Is it as would we want to recommend that Kansas early childhood stakeholders disseminate this information? Would that be a recommendation that we so that they can help us get it out, or and we can make it more specific, they disseminate by adding to their website, newsletters, you know, different ways they can disseminate. So that was kind of my thinking if we do the recommendation.
This is Peggy. I'm wondering if we could be bold enough to say that this panel recommends that communities in Kansas engage in an active planning process and have in place a formal process or relationship or documentation of how transition takes place and individual roles, and that as a support to that work, we are offering this. Basically, it becomes a toolkit, I think, in my way of thinking about it. We're offering this toolkit or resource to support that work. I don't know.
I agree with Peggy. That's what that's what the recommendation should be, that communities come together formally to have a process for transition. Here's things you can use, but the recommendation is get a process in your community.
And what Amy was just saying about everybody participating, getting this out to everybody. Yes.
What do we think about that, panel members? Go ahead, Amy Gottschammer.
Yeah, this is Amy Gottschammer. So I'm wondering too, if there are two things besides the recommendation that Peggy just described. Do we also need to make a recommendation for just sort of an information campaign about the importance of these transitions that people across the state or organizations or early childhood providers may not really be aware of?
Mm-hmm.
And that, because if they're not aware that the kindergarten transition is an important thing to consider, they're not going to be looking for it in their school districts. They're not going to be looking for some sort of a team to join, and then they won't participate.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering if there's maybe a pre-step to the recommendation of implementation.
Mm-hmm.
That's just more informational.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could make the formal recommendation with all of that included in the recommendation. So here's the formal recommendation statement. Here's why that's important. Here's tools you can use in your community to do this. Here's where you can reach out for technical assistance, like all included, the get your attention heading. Here's our formal recommendation, and here's everything you need to understand what it is and how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Would we like to start wordsmithing on that kind of, or would we like to start drafting that? Yeah. All right. So I will, nope, don't want that. That's the minutes. I will preview that there is something in this Word document that likes to capitalize the letter I. So we will go back through and uncapitalize the letter I. If anybody has a concern about that, feel welcome to let me know, but we will not try to do that in real time. So we've got some of these pieces are laid out in our role, norms, and procedures document. I think what I've heard is that this recommendation is to Kansas communities. And do we want to use the word early childhood stakeholders? And we will, I'll note, we'll go through and draft this, and then we'll take formal action. So we've got this piece. We've got background information where we have outlined, the perhaps we say the Kansas Early Childhood Recommendations Panel convened or
Tasked.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. A work group with developing developing resources for communities to support an active planning process regarding or do we want to say something along the lines of, this transition into kindergarten is a critical time or a critical moment as a child begins their K-12 experience? Do we have any thoughts on what we might want to say that just says, this is important?
I would say child and parent. And
can you help me out, Sheila? So the
transition into kindergarten is a critical process. For both for both children and families. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
This is Amy Gottschammer. I was just going to ask Peggy, is there any language that might apply here that is used in Head Start that you can think of offhand?
As part of school readiness.
There you go.
I was just just looking, this is Kim Kennedy, looking to see what add on ECLKC, which is the Early Childhood Learning Knowledge Center website for Head Start. And it talks about the fact that children experience many transitions, including from home, early care and education settings, and then from those settings then on to kindergarten. It says supporting these transitions for children, families, and staff is critically important because even positive change can be challenging. I'm kind of skipping ahead to get to some of the important stuff.
And Kim, if I could jump in. One, I super appreciate you spelling out Early Childhood Learning and Knowledge Center for us. Thank you. Two, I love that you said children, families, and staff, because I think that that helps drive home that getting ready for kindergarten is an all hands on deck kind of experience. So Sheila, if it's all right with you, I think I'll add that in here. I'm sorry, go ahead, Kim.
It says that that's okay. The transitions can have far-reaching efforts on children's well-being and academic success. Program staff consider the long-term process of building and maintaining the capacities to support children and families at all levels. So really, I mean, a lot of.
Go ahead. Pardon, I'm sorry. One thing that comes to mind as you're reading that is to meet the child where they are.
Yes. Does that kind of give us enough to play off of, or do you want me to keep looking for more information?
This is Amy Gotchamer. I like what you were saying, Kim, about the positive stress, because it isn't just the child, you know, as we've indicated, it's the family too, because I know in our center, we frequently have parents that are really stressed about the whole pre-K year. You know, is my child learning enough? Should they be able to read before they get to kindergarten? Things like that, that maybe have no basis in reality in the school district, but they don't know that yet. And so that's why this whole year process is so important, so that their expectations are realistic and they don't unduly burden and stress themselves over what their child needs to learn in this last year of preschool.
This is Debbie Deere. I have a comment saying, just as a reminder, that the governor states that we are all early childhood stakeholders rather than separating out just Kansas communities.
Very good.
So Debbie, would we want to adjust any of this language right here when we're thinking about who the recommendation is made to? I'll let you think on that for a minute.
Yeah, the comment was mine. Sorry. You know, yeah, I think the issue is just not separating them out, calling them out separately, but more combining them together to make them more of a team.
So would this is Emily Barnes. What if you said Kansas communities of early childhood stakeholders? Since they're, instead of and, use of.
I see some nods. Awesome. So we've got, I think, some background language here, some background information at the top, and then we can say that this work group developed for communities to use and adapt to support this kind of and then I can just take this draft language that we shared out. So this, the intent is that this memorandum of understanding will be available for use by every community in the state of Kansas that chooses to do so. We've got,
Amanda, I would just want to point out, this is Kim Kennedy again. One more thing that popped out here at me. I I think is important to add. And this is from the ECLKC website, but it talks about when there's successful transitions, children and families are more likely to experience better long-term school success. So just
I like that. What if we quote that?
And success.
I like that. What if we quote that directly and we can include like a footnote so that we're noting where we got it from? Can you say it one more time for me, Kim?
When these transitions are successful, children and families are more likely to experience better long-term school success.
Awesome, thanks. And then go ahead, Peggy.
Well, yeah, could we go back up to the who this is to? I'm struggling a little bit. I mean, I know that we all believe what the governor said, that we are all early childhood stakeholders. I'm concerned, though, that in this document that may actually water it down a little bit and not focus who we're wanting to take action and pay attention. And people may disagree. I'm just but I felt like Kansas Communities was a strong target and saying who should be reading this, and the early childhood stakeholders is who should be involved, who should be brought into the work. I mean, early childhood stakeholders broadens it out in my mind so that it could be the whole state of Kansas. This needs to be a community, and in some communities, it's going to be a sub-community agreement, depending on how many school districts and how many entities there are, and whether they're able to work at I know one community has talked about, well, they have several school districts, and can they figure out a way to bring everybody together under one MOU? And that would be awesome. Or some places there might be 3 or 4 within a community because there's that many different school districts, and there's good reason that they should be separate. So I just feel like saying to Kansas, we're saying to Kansas communities that this is a community process that we want every community to engage in, and it should involve early childhood, should parents and schools and early childhood providers and Head Starts and all the different entities that we've mentioned, but just I don't know.
I wonder. Go ahead.
This is Debbie. I wonder, instead of putting it in the to section, if we could just incorporate it somehow down in the background information, do more like what Peggy's saying as to who it's to, and then, reference down here, kindergarten is a critical process for children, families, and staff. And, we somehow incorporate in there, we are all considered early childhood stakeholders, just to kind of make communities embrace this whole concept.
And maybe this is Peggy again, reference that we all have a stake in the outcome. This is important to all of us, whether we have a child transitioning into kindergarten or not. It affects the entire community. It's like, kind of the expectation of why early childhood is important to people without kids. Kids are our future. They are what will drive our economics. They are what will drive our community leadership, those kinds of things.
This is Debbie again. I think it just speaks to how we've had several conversations lately, along with the K-pop work that's going on, that, we want to elevate the importance of early childhood in all aspects of communities, and kind of start getting them to thinking that it's not just about who teaches the young children or their families, it's everybody.
This is Amy Meek, and I just think about this whole process really is birth to 5, not just that year before kindergarten. That's important. It's the transitions from home visitation program to preschool, or to new child care center, or part C to part B, all those services and early childhood programs that touch a child between 2 and 5 that can really impact a successful transition at 5 years old into kindergarten. So,
So if we're saying successful collaboration should engage a wide variety of stakeholders in a community who support young children and their families. This is an issue that affects the entire community, or that, I don't know if that sounds quite right. This is an issue that, go ahead, Peggy.
This is an opportunity that impacts the entire community.
And then I'm thinking that we, so for background information, we have our first paragraph just be about why this issue is important, and then move this sentence down here to talk about the work of the work group, so that there's that background. And then we've got this, this information from the needs assessment. And we will clean up this formatting a bit as we finalize it. There we go. We've got a description here of the recommendations panel, or of the work group.
And I just want to take this opportunity, this is Debbie, to give another shout out to the work group that put all of this together, because they really didn't meet that many times. And I think they got a lot accomplished in a very short time, and were able to bring back a product to us that, you know, is very useful.
So in our background information, we would have this first paragraph about why the transition is important. We'd have a description of the work group. We would have what the work group did, and we would note the connection that we have to the All In for Kansas Kids needs assessment and strategic plan. All right, so thank you everybody for working through that piece. And so now we get to say the Kansas Early Childhood Recommendations Panel recommends that piece. And Peggy, I think that you had shared a starting point. Is it, and I might not have caught this right, so please do give me a second to type and then let me know what needs to get fixed. All right, here is a starting point. What do we want to add or change?
This is Peggy. I like the word intentional planning process.
Could we say either all communities in Kansas or all Kansas communities? Maybe something about through formal multi-sector groups or something like that, or formal multi-sector collaboration across the community, or I don't know, something to know that pull a group of people together.
So this process should engage
a wide representation of early childhood family, and say families first. families, early childhood entities, and schools in the community.
I wonder if we want to say, yeah, entity.
I think also, this is Peggy still, sorry, that it should result in a formal agreement defining the intention, the roles, responsibilities, and specific activities.
Can you say that one more time? This process should result in a formal agreement.
Which to define the role, intention, or the goals, the roles, responsibilities, and specific activities of the community kindergarten transition process. How's that as a starting place?
This is Kelly France Langford. I'm wondering if in the previous sentence, it should say, maybe this is where we include early childhood stakeholders. So this process should engage a wide representation of early childhood stakeholders, including families, schools, etc.
Including families, maybe early childhood care and education providers.
And then also, I think it's important to add the and et cetera after school. So we're not thinking, okay, we've got families, early childhood care and education in schools, and we're done. Like community organizations, like we can just wrap it all up with
partners. Do we like partners?
Other partners, yeah.
Yeah.
Amanda, we use the mixed delivery system and our strategic plan, our blueprint, and wondering, we'd probably need to define that though, because that's a term we've started to use more as it's a mixed delivery system, but I don't, that touches children and families birth to 5. And
so we would say maybe other partners in the community and the mixed delivery system, or
other partners in the community mixed delivery system. I mean, each community, of course, looks different, but
that does leave a specific doorways, Peggy, for like homeschooling entities or
others
less formal.
Yep.
We haven't
Mental
referenced
health.
local. This is Cornelia Stevens. Sorry, we haven't referenced local business, businesses' role in terms of just being stakeholders in early childhood, whether it's doctors' offices or, whatever it is. I just sometimes people hear early childhood stakeholder and they think, well, that's just the preschool, or that's just the provider, or that's just the home visitor, or that's just the whatever. And if we're really wanting to make it community, then should we be intentional about that, to remind people that, although you may not be providing direct service, you do still have a stake in the game, because it impacts your children or the work that you do or your employers. Or I don't want to go like so far off on a tangent that, whatever, but I just, when I look at the examples of potential partners, local business is there. And so should that somehow be in there? It's just a thought.
This is Debbie. If this document's going to be attached to the MOU and the work plan, and they reference other potential partners on their appendix, would that suffice to include that entire list of all of those people that we're thinking?
It's a good point.
So we might say the attached template memorandum of understanding may be used as a starting point for communities to adopt or adapt as needed to fit to fit their local needs. That's two needs in a sentence, but and two uses. But how does that go? Does that kind of capture the not top-down nature of what we're trying to get at, Peggy?
Yeah, I think, and maybe the second needs could be goals.
Thank you.
This is Amy. We also have a lot of process in the first 3 or 4 sentences, but I don't know if there's an opportunity to switch out some of those.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could just delete process and just say this if we would like.
You could say agreement.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, we've got, so this should result in a formal agreement.
Oh, below.
Yeah, so is it that planning or collaboration?
Collaboration is good. We don't have that in there.
Amanda, this is Peggy. What if we said this work should be done in a collaborative manner?
Hey, Amanda, this is Angie Sanger. And in the strategic plan, we use real specific language like community-led solution or community collaboration. So maybe there's an opportunity to refer back to some of those key community-specific statements in the strategic plan.
I like that. So perhaps we replace this work with community-led collaboration, Angie?
It would certainly point back to the strategic plan, which is referenced right above, and then get to the nature of it being a community-led solution.
So maybe we say community-led collaboration should be done in an inclusive manner. So we have covered, or I don't know if we've completely covered, but we have addressed the, here's our recommendation for communities. And then we had also highlighted that, that there is this kind of element of dissemination, that, that there's a wide variety of, or I say wide variety a lot, that there are partners with statewide reach who have the ability to share the importance of transitions to kindergarten to help communities understand why this is important and what resources are available. Is that kind of what we were going for? All right, let's see if I can type that now that I've said it. All right. So we have spent a lot of time working on the recommendation. Perhaps one piece that we have not discussed is whether anybody had any feedback or discussion regarding what will be the appendixes of this work, the actual attachment draft memorandum of understanding and the appendix to that. Did we have any questions, comments, or specific pieces to discuss on that actual kind of the meat of the work group?
Amanda, this is Debbie, and I'm getting a request that maybe a 5-minute break would be nice.
I will take that. All right, everybody. I don't know that I have the ability to turn off. I'm afraid that I'm gonna like touch something wrong and mess up the YouTube, but yes, let's say that perhaps 10:35. We'll take a minute. We've done a lot of wordsmithing and we'll come back together in 5 minutes to discuss. Thanks. All right, I see, I'm expecting a couple more people's screen to pop on. So I'll say thank you to whoever suggested that. The time goes quick, definitely. And I definitely really appreciated the opportunity to stretch a little bit. And I hope that all of you did as well. Let's see. I think you all are currently viewing Lindsay's screen, is that right? There we go. And let me get this rearranged. There we go. Can you see the document? Fantastic. So I would like to delete one transition process here and just say a strong transition as I took a minute to read from the beginning. All right, so we have our template recommendation. We had asked if we had any conversation regarding the template MOU, the actual attachment. Did anybody have any feedback or pieces? Kelly, Mark, go ahead.
Sorry, can we go back up to the actual recommendation just real quick?
Absolutely.
Was a good time to read it in its entirety. The last statement, it can and should just chafes me a little bit. We might be able to say, further, this panel recommends that organizations with statewide reach share the messages.
This is Emily Barnes. I second that. The should has almost a compelling message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my fire and brimstone on a Friday morning. Can and should go forth and do. Thanks, everybody.
Amanda, this is Peggy. I think I saw a place up at the top, another place we could get rid of process.
The transition to kindergarten.
Let me see if I can find it again.
So there was one here, a strong transition process, and then
okay, I think it was just in the second paragraph where it says early childhood recommendation panel tasked, maybe with developing resources to support, take out and process to support active planning related to, how's that?
Yep, there we go. All right, so panel members, we are, I'll highlight and acknowledge that there's a real balance between being able to collaboratively do work together in real time like this, and then being able to take and print and sit and digest and move. And I think it's got a real balance for us in our work as we are thinking about when we need to get things out quick and when we need to sit with things and review and reflect. So I am, and in an ideal and perfect world, I think we would kind of wave a magic wand and everybody would suddenly have the sheet of paper in front of them and would be able to sit and review it. So I recommend, or I recognize that I have been scrolling around in this document and that might feel a little discombobulating on the other end of the Zoom. Would it be helpful for us to slowly go through the piece that we've worked on today and kind of just take a couple minutes for everybody to be able to read paragraph by paragraph so we can see what we've written together as it's come together? Yeah, okay. We will start at the top and we will scroll down just a little bit so that we can see the first 2 paragraphs. I will watch a timer on my phone to slowly scroll.
I think in the first sentence, we could say the transition into kindergarten, oh, this is Peggy, is critical for both children families. Take out the A process there. And take out the both because we added staff in there. So now it's 3.
Thank you.
And maybe Peggy again, it should say this successful transition into kindergarten.
This is Amy Gottschammer, though. We've got a lot of successes then, because we've got 2 in the quote from the ECLKC website, and then another successful right after that. And then we're adding 1 above. Just consideration.
This is Mallory Orlano. Could we say smooth transition? I don't know if we want to, what we want to use. And then I had a comment about meeting the child where they're at. Should we say like where they're at developmentally, or just a thought? Like we don't have to change it, but I was just thinking something.
While we're looking, this is Chelsea. I was going to say, just on that same sentence, we've got some inconsistencies. We've got child and then they and their. So I don't know if we want to say meeting the children where they are. So just another note.
Something that we say at KSDE, and we definitely don't have to use this, but we'll sometimes say a smooth transition helps kindergarten staff individualize instruction. Spell instruction correctly. Instruction and environments for each child at the beginning of the school year. Sheila, I know that this originally, that this had been language that you'd highlighted. Does this still capture what we were going for? Oh, sorry, I see that Sheila is not back yet. How do we feel about this, folks?
This is Mallory, Amanda. I think that sounds great.
This is Kim, and I'm going back to that first sentence. When we took out the word processed, then the latter part of that sentence just doesn't flow right.
I wonder if it's the transition into kindergarten.
Maybe you just say is a smooth, well, we already said smooth transition, but to
about
just say,
well,
yeah,
I
How
wonder.
about a smooth I'm sorry, this is Cornelia. Smooth transition helps ensure the individual needs of each child is met as they enter the K-12 system, or as they enter something still focused on the individual child.
Let's address the first sentence. So the transition into kindergarten is critical. If we pull school readiness to the front, so if we said the transition into kindergarten is critical for the school readiness of children, families, staff, and communities.
you could say that, or you could just put a period after staff and and
just not include
take
school
off the
readiness
school readiness part because we address school readiness
later on. Okay.
Right.
And then Cornelia, oh, sorry, go ahead, somebody.
Oh, it was me. This is Jennifer Edema. I was wondering about saying something like the transition into kindergarten is a critical milestone, or I don't know. Just a thought.
I see nods. Okay. And then Cornelia, a smooth transition helps. Can you say what you said again?
Uh-oh. You know, it comes and then like, and then it doesn't. I think I was saying that a smooth transition helps ensure the individual, or I don't know about ensure, helps ensure the individual needs of children. Yeah, something along that. As they progress into like the K-12 system or something like that.
I like putting the emphasis more on their journey through their entire school. Instead of putting the emphasis on that year or the beginning of that year, like the transition is going to affect their entire journey through the K through 12 system.
Right. That's where I was going. Thanks, Kelly.
So as they, what would we say, what would we think about as they progress in their education? And some of Cornelia and Kelly, some of what I'm thinking about and wondering about balancing is that we've got some that really look at a K-12 system and some that are thinking about a pre-K-12 system and some who are just trying to say, gosh, we're just trying to be birth through or like prenatal through 20. And so we've got kind of that funky, where do we want to say that there's the system, or where does the system start, I guess?
Yeah, I like their education, just as long as we broaden it out from just that 1 year.
This is Emily Barnes. The progress in their education, could it be progress through their education?
Yes.
This is Mallory Armano. Kind of piggyback on Emily. Could we say through their educational career? I refer to that a lot when talking about, you know, the pre-K to 12 kids in classes. So I don't know if we use that language or not, but just a thought.
This is Maritas. We also, in the same paragraph, we also said that when these transitions are successful, children and families are more likely to experience better long-term school success. I am wondering if what we're saying is already captured in that statement from ECLKC.
This is Cornelia. On a part of our mission statement, we say something about progressing through school and life, because it really is giving them the right foundation for school and life, because they need to start out ready at kindergarten. And so maybe that works. Maybe.
I see nods and I like that.
I like that too. I think it brings back to the last sentence where this impacts the entire community.
And so then are we all okay if I delete what's highlighted? Yep. I like being able to highlight the early childhood learning and knowledge center website for that piece. And then, yeah, how do we feel about this paragraph, folks?
This is Amy Chammer. I do have a question. We're saying for the second sentence, a smooth transition helps kindergarten staff meet the individual needs as they progress through school and life. It makes it sound like the kindergarten staff are helping them out through the rest of their life. And they're really only there for 1 year. Maybe to get a good start in school and life, but not for the duration. I don't know, maybe it's just me.
Right, and this is Emily Barnes. I'm going to piggyback on what Amy's saying. One of the things that's not sitting well with me is, you know, a lot of providers and early educators, we've been really trying to highlight the need for things like purposeful play, and that, you know, play is our children's work. And some of this wording feels like we're getting a little more objective based, you know, like when we used educational career, you know, there, I understand the point of using that, but at the end of this, you know, 4 and 5 and 6 year olds, they still need to be playing a lot in order to learn. And so I think our language needs to reflect that developmental need for our children.
I'm wondering if we perhaps deleted what's highlighted and just said a smooth transition help kindergarten staff meet the individual needs of children, if that might simplify.
I see wisdom in that.
This is Amy Gottschammer again. Yeah, because I think that it really what we're saying is that the smooth transition helps the kindergarten staff meet their needs, you know, upon entry into the system. But yeah. But I'm okay with that.
And this is Debbie. I'm getting a comment in the chat, just kind of saying less is more.
Here to that. So I might suggest that we change this A to a D, so that we've got, that reads more clearly to me.
And then maybe, this is Peggy, that last sentence should say a solid, sustainable transition plan impacts the entire community in a positive way, or benefits the entire community.
I wonder if we say, does that get it?
Well, I think I really was trying to convey the expectation that this is something that becomes part of the community and is sustainable rather than a one and done.
Yeah. Maybe.
Well, how about saying a defined, sustainable kindergarten transition plan? I'm trying to get, not say process again. Yeah. What do people think about that?
I see thumbs up. All right, any last final pressing thoughts on paragraph number 1? We'll take a look at paragraph number 2. I wonder if we might just say this work group to shorten it up.
And this is Debbie, and I took this list of people that are represented from the panel, norms and procedures.
Thanks, Debbie.
This is Melissa. Would you mind if I wordsmith this sentence just a bit? I think the word various could be removed because we go on to explain that it's individuals representing, and I would like to see it say our mixed delivery system instead of a. Yeah, I would take that out too, I think.
This is Peggy. If we could look at the first sentence a little bit, maybe the panel tasked a work group
with developing community resources?
With developing resources
Mm-hmm.
to support active community planning.
Mm-hmm.
Or transitions into kindergarten.
This is Debbie. So if we changed the R mixed delivery system, then should it say representatives, or does that need to be plural?
This work group was comprised of individuals representing the following aspects of our mixed delivery system. Maybe we just say including. That goes.
We need the representative of in any of those. Could it just be including local education agencies, institutions of higher learning,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera?
Mm-hmm. Higher education. Start agencies. I see nods. I think I'm going to move us on to our third paragraph.
Sorry, just going to that very last sentence of the second paragraph again. Is and other confusing to anyone? It seems like it needs to be fleshed out just a little bit, or maybe add others, or, I mean, what is the other representing there? Other partners makes sense, yeah.
Does parent and parent of a young child need to be capitalized?
Nope.
Was it only one parent? Was there only one parent on the work group? Yes, no, one parent, or were there multiple parents?
I think that in the context of the work group, there was one person
One
who
parent?
identified
Okay.
that as
That's
a
what it
piece
says
of the experience they brought. Debbie, is that right? Am I right? Or anybody?
I think there was only one. There was one parent, I believe.
I'm trying to. I'm not sure we had a parent on there. I think it was. I'm not sure if we did. I mean, I'm sure there were members of that who were parents, but that's not what they were being representative of.
Yeah, I think it was there was not an identified person that was there in that role.
I wonder if we might note, Peggy, I'm thinking specifically about the webinar in September and the work that went. So we had members of the work group, and then we also had work to engage partners, including parents and national experts and communities who have gone through this process. So I'm wondering if we might want to say something like, this work group was comprised of individuals representing our mixed delivery system. Take this piece out and say, and other partners, and then say the work group engaged parents, communities, and other experts in this area as they developed Or maybe we just say the work group engaged parents, communities, and other experts in this area. Does that kind of accurately capture the process?
This is Peggy. I'd be comfortable with that. Anybody else on the work group have a thought on that?
Good deal.
Would it be also, Amanda, a benefit to also put something in regards to your state-funded preschools representatives?
I think that's attempting to be local educational agencies. It's kind of, yeah, but we could say more clearly. Well, yeah, I think that gets it if you're good with that. Yep. As we're looking at the third paragraph, do we have any, or what do we see? Go ahead.
This is Amy Meek, and I'm not sure if we need in the second sentence that chooses to do so, since we're
Oh, sure.
I think we could just put a period there.
Like so? I deleted that kind of quick, everybody, sorry.
I think we can also get rid of, in that very first sentence of the third paragraph, this kind of, and just say support active, intentional, and collaborative process.
Maybe support and.
Yeah.
This is Amy Meek again, and we have in the previous paragraph, this work group starting a sentence, and then the work group on the last one, and then this work group again. So I want to change at least one of those to start.
In the paragraph above, could, instead of saying the work group engaged parents, could we just say this work? Or does it have to specifically refer to the work group? Or their work?
We could just say parents, communities, and other experts in the area were engaged.
I like that.
How about we intentionally engaged? Parents, communities, and other experts in this area were intentionally engaged.
That does give us two intentionallys back to back, so I might delete it here and just say we're engaged. There we go. And then
this is Peggy. That feels more true anyway, because some of the other voices came through other avenues of information that the group, it wasn't something the work group specifically went out and did. So
yep. I think everywhere else we have kindergarten lowercase.
Amanda, this is Maritas. On the first sentence, it says, this work group developed a memorandum of understanding for communities to use. And then the next sentence, it says, this memorandum of understanding will be available for use by every community. So
whether we need that second sentence.
It's just a...
What if we said for any community to use and adapt? And then we could delete the sentence. Okay. might we say a successful agreement or a I wonder if we say template here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we say
Amanda,
this.
Oh, Natalie.
Go ahead, Natalie.
That's what I was thinking too. We don't want to make this sound like this is the only thing that they can use, but that they can, this is available if they need it.
Yep. And then we can say this template can be all inclusive between the entities involved.
And
maybe the template is designed
involved in 2 sentences.
So we can say this template is designed to be, and then sorry, Amy, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We have involved in that sentence and then the next sentence, or the.
I wonder if we simplify and delete what's highlighted. So we can say this template is designed to be maybe all inclusive between partners.
Is it the planning of the template or the template itself is not? It's the process is intended to be all inclusive.
And use of the template.
There you go.
In that next sentence, in addition, each entity, I don't like will include all children, will.
How about be inclusive?
Will consider all children involved in their programs, or yeah, will.
Consider, Amy. Maybe in addition, each entity will consider all children involved in their programs who are preparing to transition into kindergarten in their planning. Does that make the sentence too long?
Well, I feel, this is Peggy, I feel like suddenly we're getting really prescriptive here, and I don't think that's what we're trying to do.
Oh, sure. So what if, yeah, Peggy, that's an interesting thought and question. What are we trying to say here? We're trying to say that when there is a broad-based process, then that ensures that, or that ensures equity for all children in the community, regardless of what program or what their experiences are prior to kindergarten.
Well, I wonder, this is Peggy, and I wonder if we're trying to say that it's recommended that a community planning process, or that a community planning process, including the just a minute here. It's recommended that a community planning process, or that an active, intentional, collaborative community planning process is used, period. The template is offered or provided as a resource to support a successful outcome and plan. I don't know.
With the piece being specific to equity, do we just need to make sure that we say that it includes all children? Because we don't want to give the impression that they're just choosing certain kids to participate.
Yeah, to piggyback off what Debbie just said, I think that we could get rid of that whole, in addition, each entity will consider all children's sentence by saying by incorporating cross-sector collaboration, including all children involved in programs. blah, blah, blah will provide equity. We could combine those two sentences to get rid of that in addition sentence.
This is Debbie. I have a comment from the chat saying, what about deleting all inclusive and say set parameters for agreement?
Yeah, Amanda, on the last sentence, what Kelly Mark was just saying about equity. Kelly, I think what if we pull in the all-inclusive piece there? So we'll provide equity for all children and families. Because I think the conversation was getting was focused on all types, all children coming from all programs. And then you could remove the all-inclusive on that first sentence. And then the only other comment I wondered about was up in the previous, you separated into two sentences. The first sentence on the second line, support an active, intentional process. From the lens of SMART goals, should it say timely instead of active? So timely, intentional, and collaborative process. Is that what we mean by active?
This is Peggy. I think we could just take active out and just have an intentional and collaborative process.
And then I'm wondering if we might be able to take all of this and boil it down to one concise sentence.
Well, this is Debbie, and I don't know where it fits, but I love Peggy's word of toolkit. So I don't know if that fits in anywhere in any of this that we're doing.
This is Peggy. Maybe that would, if we're going to use that, it would be that this work group developed a toolkit, a memorandum of understanding toolkit, and take out a template.
Does considering the needs of all children transitioning into kindergarten advances equitable outcomes in the community capture what we've got here?
I think it's a sentence fragment.
Considering the needs of all children.
Who's considering? I think I hear what you're getting. I think we just need to tweak it a little bit.
Maybe if we delete the extra ing. Considering the needs of all children advances equitable outcomes in the community.
How about transitioning before children?
I think, Peggy, what you're saying is it's the ings.
The considering who's I mean, it's just sort of like considering the needs. It doesn't tie it to anything. We're trying to say that when a community considers the needs of all children. Maybe what maybe equity is I don't know, assured, addressed when a community considers the needs. Maybe put equity in the front of that instead of the back of it. Does that help anchor the sentence?
What if we said cross-sector collaboration that considers the needs of all children transitioning into kindergarten ensures equitable outcomes?
That sounds better.
Did that get it, Kelly?
I think that gets it for me, and it kind of captures everything that's below it, except for the process and use of the template it's designed to be. We still need to work on that sentence, but I think in addition on below, we can take out all of that now.
So we could cut and paste this and say this process and use of the template is designed to.
And I think we just need to decide on this last sentence that you're getting ready to paste in there. This did paste in there. Are we trying to say it's designed to be all inclusive of the community partners, or are we trying to say it's designed to set parameters for the agreement? Those are two different things.
I like that. Or is it this? Is designed to outline parameters for agreement between all partners in a community? Is that what we're trying to say here? Yep.
Yeah, and this is Peggy. We should either switch everything to toolkit or we should be consistent between toolkit and template.
My thought on that is, what about putting the template back into the memorandum of understanding up top, and in this sentence it says the template is a resource. Could we say the template is a toolkit? Because I do think the word template needs to be in there because that's what it is.
Have to maybe say the toolkit includes a template. I mean, I don't think they would think that one template is a toolkit.
To me, yeah, the template is part of the kit.
Okay, process to a process for communities. This toolkit.
Well, this is Amy Gottchammer again. Technically, it's got the template and the work plan worksheet.
There we go.
Would also be part of the
There we go. Yep, thank you. So this toolkit, the toolkit includes a template memorandum of understanding and a work plan for communities. This process, or this toolkit. And then I think that means that we can delete all of this. Yeah. I feel good about this paragraph. Yeah. This pulls directly from the needs assessment. We will clean up the formatting a bit with the bullet points, but these include some direct quotes from Kansas families. We got an extra comma here. Do we see anything else in this section? And then we've got this recommendation addresses the following goals, strategies, and tactics in the strategic plan. Thanks for pulling those, Debbie. And I think that these are all actually tactics. All right, so this is kind of the important piece. So let's take a minute to read and look at this.
This is Peggy. Community collaboration should be, could we say conducted instead of done in the,
yeah. Yep. Maybe should happen. Is that clear? Yeah.
Occur.
I like that. Wide representation.
This is Amy Meek. We have on the last sentence, the attached template, the attached toolkit.
All right, panel, that was a process, but I do really appreciate us working through it together. We get to decide whether we'd like to have a, well, first, I should say, kind of last call, do we need to go back to look to any of the pieces of the document that we just worked through?
Sorry, I have one more thing. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
sure thing. You're good.
This should result in a formal agreement. And I know that we changed this a little bit earlier. After reading that long first sentence, I'm like, this should, what should? Maybe we could just say this collaboration should result in. Is that too many collaborations group? It just, this feels a little bit mysterious right there.
How about this process of collaboration?
Or is it the MOU? This is Cornelia, sorry. Is it the MOU should result in a formal agreement that defines the goals, responsibilities, and specific activities of the kindergarten transition process?
This is Peggy. Well, the MOU is the formal agreement. So what we're trying to say is it should result in an MOU.
Right.
Yeah. So the planning process is what should result in the formal agreement.
That gets it. Thank you.
Okay.
So we say that defines the goals, roles, and responsibilities, and specific activities.
That defines here. I think that is more clear.
And it's Cornelia. I forget to say my name. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Cornelia. All right, folks, we get to decide now whether we'd like to have a motion to adopt this recommendation or whether we think that we should sit and hold it to move on. So this is Amanda, I'm very open to taking the direction of you as panel members here. I think that I will highlight that when we are having motions for action, we want to clearly state your name in the motion if you'd like to make one. What do we think?
Well, as the person that was tasked with convening the work group, I'm willing to, we brought this because we were proud of it. And we were intentional about getting to that point. So I guess I would be willing to put a motion out. And I may need some help in crafting the wording, but okay, this is Peggy Kelly with the Kansas Head Start Association moves that the toolkit for kindergarten transition community planning be do we adopt things? Is that what we do?
I'm wondering if we say, Peggy, and since I've got this Word document, adopt this. I think it's that simple. I move that the panel adopt this kindergarten transitions recommendation and the accompanying toolkit.
And do we need to include that we're encouraging panel and partners to disseminate? Or is that a separate action?
So when I type this, what I imagine is that you're saying we are adopting or we are recommending this document. We're adopting this document, and I think that that piece is right here, Peggy, in the text that we've got. I should highlight for everybody. I've got this open because it's the Word document open, but I'll delete the motion out of it once Peggy shares it.
I move that the Kansas Early Childhood Recommendations Panel adopt this kindergarten transition recommendation and the accompanying toolkit.
Do we have a second for that?
Amy Gottchammer seconds.
Do we have any discussion on that motion?
This is Dave Lindeman. Do we adopt this, or do we recommend that the cabinet adopt it?
That is an excellent point, Dave. We serve as an advisory group to the cabinet, so I do think that it could be very appropriate that we recommend that the cabinet adopt this recommendation. What do you think, Peggy, as the maker of the motion?
Well, and that's a conversation we had in our work group is, okay, what happens from here and what are the authorities? And I guess I'm feeling a little bit like I don't know what authority this group, us here, has to actually act. It seems like we would need to ask the cabinet to take the action. And does the cabinet meet the end of, when's the next, is it and first Friday in November, the next meeting?
This is Amy. It could be December 4th, I believe.
December,
the first Friday of December.
Okay. I'm also feeling conscious of the time frame. We do have the kindergarten transition summit coming up in a couple of weeks, and it would be helpful to have this to work from. Although I guess we could just call it draft and still use it.
This
so I'm
is
not
Debbie.
sure what our authority is and what we do need to do to advance it. Yeah, Debbie.
This is Debbie. Could we just add on here that I move that the Kansas Early Childhood Recommendations Panel adopt this to present to the cabinet for approval? I mean, I think formally we are accepting this document as something we have created and agreed upon. But then it needs to move on to the next step with the cabinet. Does that make sense?
This is Amy Gottchammer. I mean, it seems inherent in our name that we make recommendations. We don't adopt anything. So and although the wording sounds odd, it seems like the Kansas Early Childhood Recommendations Panel recommends that the Children's Cabinet adopt the kindergarten transitions recommendation and the accompanying toolkit.
That does make more sense.
Is that what we're doing?
I would amend the motion as stated. Do I need to read it?
Probably gonna hurt, Peggy.
I amend the motion on the table. I move to read. I move the Kansas Early Childhood Recommendation Panel recommends that the Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund adopt this kindergarten transition recommendation and the accompanying toolkit.
Then Amy is the second of the motion. Would you be?
Yes,
open
Amy
up?
seconds. Amy Gottchammer seconds.
Awesome. Do we have any discussion on this piece? All right, I'm going to ask panel members, as we have been doing, either raise your hand or do a thumbs up emoji in the chat. And thank you. I'm scrolling. All right, I don't think that I see anybody who's not in agreement, but if you would like to vote no or to abstain from the vote, it would probably be helpful if you would come off mute and say your name. All right, I will clearly say that the Early Childhood Recommendations Panel unanimously passes that motion. So thanks, everybody. Congratulations. We've made our first successful recommendations as the Kansas Early Childhood Recommendations Panel. I'm mindful that it is 11:31. I will get you out of here in 5 minutes or less. I will move on to the next piece of our agenda. Yes, everybody, let's take a minute to kind of pat ourselves on the back and say, gosh, we managed to bear with Amanda as she spelled in real time. We were able to collaborate on Zoom with 33 people on the Zoom, and that's a really big deal. So thanks, everybody. because I'm hopeful that this will be the first of many recommendations to come. And a huge thank you, as we've said a couple of times, a huge and genuine thank you to the work group members who put in a great deal of time and energy on this, on what can only be described as a really unique and busy time, and really managed to give us a great roadmap as we all worked through what this is going to look like together. Do we have any requests for future agenda items? I will highlight that our upcoming meeting on November 20th will feature a presentation from the Kansas Children's Service League that will describe the Kansas Power the Positive Coalition and build on some of the conversations that we've had about connecting to business members and chambers of commerce and other economic partners. And we'll also highlight the new opportunities that we have to help make Kansas families aware of what services are available in their community. But do we have any requests for future agenda items or other requests for panel staff? All right, well, as you have questions, comments, concerns, please do feel really welcome to be in touch. Our upcoming meetings are here on the screen. We referenced everybody is really excited about the Kindergarten Transition Summit on November 13th. So if you are excited and engaged in this work, there is opportunity still to sign up on the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund website for that summit. We will, and the link is here on the screen. That's going to be a great opportunity for communities to come together. Yes, Peggy?
Could I just please mention that the deadline is October 30th?
The deadline is October 30th. So
for the summit.
For the summit. And we will make sure that we include the link for that information in our follow-up message. You can see that our next meeting is on Friday, November 20th at 9 a.m. and that these are on the third Fridays of the month beginning at 9. Thank you, everybody, for giving us an extra 3 minutes on your Friday. I hope that all of you enjoy a really wonderful weekend. It's great to see all of you. Take good care.